how does complex trauma affect the person overall? And what has come out as we've studied this topic and worked with hundreds and hundreds of people is that complex trauma affects almost every area of a person's life. We've come up with a list of 60 different ways that it affects people's life in a negative way. We're not going to be able to look at all of those in this series. We're just going to look at a sampling of that. But there are lots of different ways that it does affect them. And hopefully, over time, you'll be able to learn more about that. Trauma basically is this. It's not that you face a problem. It's that you face a problem without the resources to handle it. And because of that, you do not have the tools to handle that problem. So fear takes over that you are going to get hurt or killed. And that kicks in survival mode, which is fight, flight. And if you're too little to fight back or too little to flee, you freeze, you shut down.
My childhood was really confusing. It was very unpredictable all the time. It was kind of like walking on eggshells every day.
I felt uneasy. I didn't feel safe. I'm like, who is this new guy around the house, you know? And it was very uncomfortable.
I couldn't live anymore. And it was either that or I was gonna die or I was gonna get better.
When we talk about trauma, there's two types, and they go by simple and complex. And simple doesn't mean it's no big deal. Simple means one-time event. A rape, a burglary, a car accident, that then gets diagnosed with PTSD. One-time event trauma. Complex is in connection to simple. And what it means is more than one. So it is saying a person's in an environment where they're constantly feeling danger. So we know that there are about 3 different environments that produce complex trauma in a child. The first one is the most obvious, and that is a child who experiences abuse. We think of physical abuse automatically, where a child is beaten or hurt in some way by the parents, but it can also include verbal abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse where they're put down, criticized, called names, all of that very hurtful stuff. There can even go into sexual abuse, spiritual abuse. All of those, it's very obvious the child does not feel safe, their life is in danger, or they're in danger of being hurt.
I was bullied very badly. It started in grade 4, all the way through to my high school years. Got to the point where I wasn't allowed to come. I wasn't allowed to go, stay home sick anymore, because I would pretend to be sick or I'd make myself sick just so I wouldn't have to go to school. I would self-harm for sure in order just to feel better. Like, kids they're not fun to be around when they don't like you, especially when you don't know why.
The second environment is the environment of abandonment. The most obvious within that is a child who is taken from their parents and put into care. So they now are with foster parents or foster caregivers. They can feel abandoned because their question is, why did they put me into care? Why don't they want me? This can go in some cases into children who are put up for adoption. They can come to a point in their life where they go, why did my biological parents not want me? They might have a beautiful home, but they still wonder, was I not good enough for my biological parents? Not all kids who are adopted go through that, but some of them can. Another phenomena that's happening in our culture today is that of children who are going through the divorce of their parents. So their parents aren't technically abandoning them, but to a child it at times can feel that one or both have abandoned them to some degree. And so they can, from their perception, wonder if the divorce was possibly because of something they had done or something that was wrong with them.
Like, I just remember growing up just wishing that my dad was there, and he never was. And that was hard for me.
At 15, my mom decided that she told me that I was going to go visit my grandparents in Winnipeg for Christmas vacation. And I remember my grandma, bless her soul, she's no longer with us, and you know, she was tough. But I remember her asking me, what would you do if you had to live here? And I said, didn't even skip a beat, I said, I'd run away, obviously. That's what I did. Like, I ran away from home, I did whatever I wanted to do. And she turned to me in her frustration and she said, well, that's too bad, because your mother doesn't want you anymore, so you have to come here and live with us. And I recall that part of my life so clearly, because whatever little tiny piece of my heart that was left was crushed in that moment, and I was devastated.
Another part of abandonment would be a parent who is in addiction themselves. So basically they are not there for the children, and the children pick up on that and they feel abandonment.
I remember growing up, like, wishing that my dad was in my life, you know, because, like, I had a stepdad, but I didn't really, like, click with him. And when it came down to, like, having heart-to-hearts with somebody or telling somebody about, like, how I'm feeling and stuff, it was just mostly my mom or nobody at all. I would just keep it in myself.
The third environment is that of neglect. And this is the most subtle of the environments that produce complex trauma. But it's very interesting in looking at the brains of children who've gone through abuse versus the brains of children who've been neglected. Their brains have damage done in similar areas. So neglect can be that the parents are there to provide physically for the children, all their physical needs, but for some reason they're not providing for the emotional needs of the children. So you could have a parent who's a workaholic, and they are just preoccupied with their job all the time. Even when they're at home, they're still thinking about their job. And so to the child, they're physically present, the parent is physically present, but they're just not there for them emotionally. That's a form of neglect.
Understanding now, I mean, like, they bought me their love. My dad was never there for me because he was always working.
There's some parts of my family that obviously were a little bit, I guess, not normal. My dad, he's a wonderful man, don't get me wrong, but he's very cold. He doesn't know how to love. Like, he's not the hugging kind of person. So that as a child is hard not to have that. My mom tried to do everything that she could, but she has her own issues as well.
You could have a parent who has their own health issues or mental health issues. They want to be emotionally available for their children, but they're just not capable of that. The child, though, perceives the message that I must not be good enough for my parent to want to give me attention.
I have an older sister, an older brother, and a little brother. And I don't know, I just felt like I didn't really matter as much as they did.
Another thing is you could have a parent who's an addict, and they're just wrapped up in their own stuff, in their own addiction, and so they're just not capable of being there for their children. So what happens in the child is that the child feels very much alone. They want to connect with their parents. They need comfort from their parents. They need certain needs met, and they're not being met by their parent. And so the child begins to feel all alone in the world, that abandoned. And they begin to think the reason they're being neglected is because something is wrong with them.